Hello and welcome to Smartsheet Sessions, a series exploring how businesses can power growth, creativity, collaboration, and achievement by transforming their approaches to work. My name is Russell Parsons, Editor-in-Chief of Marketing Week, and I am your host for this session, a collaboration between Marketing Week and Smartsheet. Our task today is not inconsiderable. It's to figure out what should come next for businesses looking to challenge old ways of working. Key questions we'll tackle today include: what does the future of work look like? Where will people be working from? And how can we foster creativity and collaboration, especially in marketing, where both are central to achieving results? These are big questions, but hopefully ones we'll be able to answer in this episode. Good news is I'm not doing this alone, so let me introduce our expert panel. I have Mackenzie, who's Chief Executive at Demos, the cross-party think tank that is seeking, I quote, ideas for renewal, reconnection, and the restoration of hope, with new ways of working chief amongst its concerns. I also have Dan Montalbano, who's the Global Head of Operations at agency VCCP, one of the UK's biggest independents and celebrated creative agencies. Finally, Pete Markey, CMO at Boots, who began his job in the heat of the pandemic and was thrown straight into the not insignificant challenge of transforming one of the oldest and best known retail brands. Welcome. And now together today, we're going to be exploring not just what the future of work looks like, but how organizations can ensure that creativity and collaboration can thrive. So let's kick off. Pete, let me begin with you. Boots is one of the great historic staples of British retailing. I'm interested to hear how remote and hybrid working has been working for your team. What have been the most significant consequences that you've noted in your time there of shifting working practices?
Yeah, thank you, Russell. It's definitely been a period of evolution for us, and I've been in the business just under 6 months now, and we've been working on a very major campaign, our biggest in years, that comes out shortly, and doing that while still in semi-lockdown conditions has actually has not been a bad process. We've worked in, I think, a really quick, agile, smart way between us and our agency partners to develop a brand new creative concept, to film that in lockdown conditions, to plan that, to connect that right across the business, because it's not just been marketing involved, it's been all the trading teams, our frontline teams as well. And actually, technology has helped us to still reach and deliver that achievement, despite the fact that most of us have not been able to be together for much of that. So I think there's only been a couple of sort of face-to-face interactions with the agency and ourselves as clients, sort of with WPP in that time frame. So definitely technology's helped us, and I think just working really smartly as a team to reach decisions quick has definitely helped. I think the challenge, I guess, though, more broadly for me starting a new job, has been not getting to meet all the team. So that's probably one of the more challenging parts of working remotely. I've got a team of just over 100 people, and I've just obviously not been able to interact with all of them in a meaningful way over the last 6 months. So, I'm hopeful as we evolve how we work, there'll be a way over time to connect more with people, face to face in a more meaningful way as we build out the team. That being said, we've delivered a lot in the last 6 months with more to come, and actually, even despite the restrictions, we've got a lot done. I'm really, really proud of the team and what we've done together.
We talk a lot about silos in marketing, silos between units within an organization, but silos in terms of partnerships as well. Is that a concern, and how have you overcome that?
I think we've done well to sort of battle against the silos as they've come in, really, Russell. So I think actually for me, the last few months has been about how do we remove anything that might get in the way of us reaching a really positive result for the business. And actually, there's been a lot of energy behind this particular campaign with a single-minded focus, which is all about how Boots has transformed and changed in the last 12 months, and what we've done from transforming our beauty offering to what we've done in pharmacy and healthcare. So it's been very much, a business-driven initiative that's come through marketing with a common vision. So I think the way to remove those silos has been around finding that commonality, finding the goal, the North Star we're all heading for, and getting everyone organised behind it. So, and then you find there's energy and you find there's commitment, and people will move mountains to make sure there's no blockers in the way. And that's taught us a lot. We're already working on Christmas, so it's been interesting to be simultaneously doing this and working on Christmas. And so many of the learnings you'll see play out in our. We're really excited about what Christmas will bring. That sort of newer way of working that removes those barriers and means we move forward as one. It's not just marketing; it's the business together with marketing feeling the energy of that as we drive it to completion.
I suppose that in many ways would be the case regardless of what the working practices were. If you have a common North Star, as you put it, then things generally fall in behind it. So thank you for sharing some of your experiences with us, Pete. Dan, if I could come to you, I suppose this is a traditional, almost Mad Men image of creative agencies working together at a big desk with post-it notes and planning sheets, searching for the inspiration, which is obviously not an opportunity that has been afforded for the bulk of the last 16 months anyway. And also in terms of chemistry, it's said to be absolutely key in terms of working with actual clients and prospective clients. So what kind of impact has the pandemic and the shift in working practice had on that kind of thing?
I mean, I would say undoubtedly the last 18 months have been difficult for agencies, both personally and professionally, right? We've all been affected by the situation. And if we haven't directly been affected, then we probably know somebody who has been. But what I would say is that in adversity, often there's opportunity, right? And certainly at VCCP, as the challenger agency, it's baked into our DNA. So after the initial shock of everyone having to work from home, we were able to rally and find the silver linings. I mean, I think lockdown actually forced us into some new behaviors, which have actually been very good for us and for our clients. I mean, in the first instance, it pushed us out of our comfort zone, right? Which yielded almost more creativity, right? I was throwing this around the other day with our head of design. He said something along the lines of, even though geographically we're so far apart, it feels like as a team we've never been closer together. And for him, certainly from a design point of view, right? His team have actually become over the last 18 months even closer with the creative team. And again, typically it's design is a much more introverted sort of profession. You're sitting there at a computer and you're designing, you're thinking through what you're doing. But it's forced that face time and it's forced those conversations and it's brought them upstream in the creative process, which has been great. It's fostered more collaboration, it's fostered more trust. And I think a shared sense of sort of living through this and working through it together has been really good. Secondly, I'd say technology plays a big role. Technology is really important, right? We're a good example. We're a very visual agency. At VCP, we get things up on walls. If we're working through a deck or an idea or a project or anything, we'll get it up on a wall. We'll look at it and we'll do our work that way. And with the whole work from home situation, you just can't do that anymore, right? So we had to very quickly find a digital way to do that, to enable us to have those conversations and to think in the same way. And we found software that let us to do that. And we actually used it to pitch in a few instances. Again, after 18 months of death by presentation, it's nice to find different things that allow you to present ideas in a certain different way. So technology fundamental, and then the last thing really is just about being creative at problem solving, right? We do this day in and day out for our clients. For once, we had to apply it to ourselves, or we definitely had to get very creative in our approach, right? So proactive workarounds on shoots. Early in the pandemic, I had a very funny situation where an account person was out in China on set, socially distanced, of course, but on set, living and breathing it. And in order for the creative director to be there, they literally dialed him onto a laptop and were walking him around the set, looking at things so that he could feedback live on, the lighting, the cast, the wardrobe, all the stuff that a creative director would be able to do in situ. But as things progressed, we got smarter and more sophisticated more quickly. I think in the last 6 months we've got technology that allows us to dial into shoots or to have a live feed into shoots to see what's going on and feedback. So broadly, I'd say we did thrive rather than survive in the pandemic. It's made us probably more creative than we were before. Because we pulled together, right? VCCP is a family, and when family's in trouble, it's about pulling together. And I think if agencies are going to continue to succeed in this new world, it's going to be about innovation. It's about how you work, and frankly, pushing yourself to work outside your comfort zones.
It's a really great illustration, I suppose, and example of adapting and to use your word, thriving. If I could just ask you just to dwell on, if there's one thing that the new way of working has lost, is there one thing that you just can't get back if you are all sitting staring at laptop screens or however else you are working in a hybrid manner?
Yeah, 100%. I think human interaction, the creative spark that comes from having creative minds in a room together, is very difficult to replicate over screens, right? So, it's those little moments that you have in the hallway that might trigger a thought, or you look over someone's laptop and you see them playing some YouTube video that goes, oh, wait a minute, that's a cool creative angle we could explore. That kind of thing obviously has not been happening, and we miss that. No doubt we miss that. We want that back, but it's all that human touch, that human interaction is fundamental to the creative process. And so while we've certainly managed to overcome it in the short term, we want that back. We want to be together as an agency.
It's the chance interaction, isn't it? The chance meeting that I'm sure we all have missed. It was intangible and unknown to us until it's taken away, and you realise how important it actually is. Thank you for that, Dan. If I could bring you, Polly, in for your perspective, taking a step back, perhaps for the bigger picture, what do you think the big successes and failures of remote or hybrid working have been?
It's the first law of Newtonian physics, isn't it? That an object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest. And we know that defaults are incredibly powerful. So people like me, like Demos, the organization I run, have been campaigning for flexible working and more options around remote or hybrid working for decades, actually. And slowly, incrementally, we were making changes. And actually, what this forced us to do is completely shift the default. And instead of now having to make the case for flexible or hybrid or remote working, we're actually having to make the case for getting back to the office. We're thinking through all those things that being together in a physical place bring to us. And are they worth it? And are they worth it enough to get over the logistical cost, the productivity cost to, the whole country of all of that commuting, which so many of us were doing? And that's, in a way, really exciting for a policymaker, though it then puts me in the position of expressing lots of concerns. It's been great to hear from the other contributors about how exciting it's been, the opportunities, the creativity that it sparked, that sense of pulling together as a family. And from my perspective as the chief exec of a small entrepreneurial business, I feel that absolutely. I'm so proud of the team that I have worked with through this. And yet, I'm really aware that it poses all sorts of complex logistical challenges for businesses. And I think we're going to go through this big period of experimentation. Some people who say we all need to get back to the office, 9 to 5 or 9 to 7, whatever it might be, in the same place. And there's some people who say, why are we wasting money on an HQ at all? Boom, no more offices. And then they've got to navigate the complexity of, legal health and safety requirements around keeping people in their homes, and what equipment do you give with them, and what are you responsible for? Lots of it's not as simple as just getting rid of the office. But then other people trying to work out that complexity of hybrid. If you're gonna have some people in the office and some people remote, how do you make sure you're not privileging the people who are in the office? Technology is crucial there. How do you make it so that the remote participants in a meeting room can actually hear what's going on, see the whiteboard that people are putting stuff up on, all of that? There's big technology investments, I think, to make hybrid work. And if you I'm hearing lots of people saying things like, well, what we'll do is we'll get everyone in on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Well, potentially that might work for lots of businesses, so that people get the opportunity to do, the deep work that you can do on your own, and also the creative, collaborative work you do together. It's a nightmare. I mean, that is literally the worst nightmare of the train companies, because they're going to lose 40% of their business, but without any reduction in peak demand. It's also a problem for your HQ and those savings you might make for the office if actually you're going to get loads and loads of people in on the same days, it doesn't look quite as cost effective. And also from the personal perspective, it's a problem because actually I need to be at home on Thursdays at 4 to take my son to Beavers. And I also my husband needs to be at home on Tuesdays to take my daughter to Brownies. And that's how we run our lives. And we can do that because of personal flexibility with our work. And if suddenly the work is going to go back to kind of a big, lumpy, homogenous thing about Mondays or Fridays or whatever it is, that undermines lots of the value that people have got out of flexible working. So what we're going to go through is experimentation, because none of us really know the answers to that. There's Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, talked about we need to be in the office so that we can riff off each other. Some businesses need a lot of riffing, and they'll work out hacks and creative ideas, including technology, to do more riffing. Some don't. They need deep work. They need quiet spaces. And so they're going to reconfigure their offices back to single pods so that actually the one thing you can offer in an office space is really great broadband, peace and quiet, freedom from the chaos of life. And I think that's a really exciting period to go through of experimentation. The danger is policymakers going, it should be this way, it should be that way. We don't know. And all businesses are different and need to learn and adapt and try stuff out.
What you were saying is fascinating to me, and I'm sure it's fascinating to a lot of people watching. We've swung so much and so far in such a short space of time. I mean, personally, I think a lot of the predictions of seismic change post-pandemic in many cases are hogwash. But one thing that is definitely going to change is the way that we think about work, particularly if you're working in an office. Obviously, there's a lot of people who haven't changed their working practices at all in this period of time because of the nature of their jobs. So thank you for that perspective, Polly. And let me bring Pete back in on, just to respond to Polly, but let me ask you a question on the back of what she was saying. How are you approaching it? Because it's a massive jigsaw puzzle, an operational, logistical one, but obviously a cultural one where people want some things, other people want other things. So if I could just ask you just to illustrate a little bit about some of your planning thinking about how that might ultimately work at Boots, but also, again, speaking to a point about others and other influences that Polly mentioned. Are you able to have that autonomy from your parent company to work it out how best it works for you? So there's two questions there. Forgive me, Pete.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Russell. And look, I really resonated a lot, as you said, with what Polly was saying. I think we haven't got a defined end view of where we're going to end up, where this is going to end up, similar to what Polly's saying. We're finding our way through this at the moment, and also working a lot by listening to our colleagues in the business around the best ways of working for them. So at the moment, our setup is if people feel comfortable to come back into an office and work, then we're very happy to see them. I'm in an office today, for example, in Nottingham. But if people are more happy or more comfortable staying at home, then that's absolutely fine as well. You know, for a number of members of my team, our exec team, we're sort of mixing a bit of, a few days from the office, a few days at home, and also bits of time in London, in our agency offices and so on. But it's sort of, I guess it's become more, and whether this is the rhythm moving forward, Russell, I don't know, but it's more getting together for specific meetings where it's really helpful to come together. I really like what Dan said around there are things that, when you want to brainstorm or develop ideas or work on particular bits of a project, some things are just really helpful when you've got people in a room together with a flip chart and a pen, going a little bit old school. And I think what I found is that there's times we have got together, particularly as a team and also an exec team, have been those moments when it's been great to be together in that moment. But that doesn't mean we need to be together all the time for every meeting. So we're sort of evolving and finding that balance together as we go. I thought what Polly said was super. I think we're very much on the journey she described, and also trying to get a sense of what this new way of working is. But I do still feel there's going to be a role for offices. There's going to be a need for, in moments of time, coming together, shaping ideas, and delivering, shaping strategy, delivering work, as Dan was saying. It's just how do we balance that? And also equally, how do we find a way that I like what Polly was saying, and actually what Dan was saying about this sort of how you should never feel like a second-class citizen if you're at home and others are in the office. We've got to make sure there's a way that we can keep this going, that if you're the one or two people that aren't in the room, that you feel as much as if you are in the room as not. We had a session recently with our agency. It was a great offsite for just half a dozen of us. And with that, we had, similar to what Dan was saying, we had to sort of pass a laptop to keep people, but we were able to make it feel like you were actually there in the room still. And I think it's got to be like that, rather than, I remember those blooming awful conference calls where, you weren't sure whether someone was still on the call and someone trying to come in and they talk over each other. So we just need to make sure that it feels like everyone's involved, everyone's included. And I think that's where we've got to evolve over the next few months. So some more work to do, but I think an emerging pattern is coming.
Dan, your response to this kind of, I mean, as I say, we've moved a lot and people are kind of wanting ultimate flexibility, but it can't be that straightforward. There has to be some rules, there has to be some methodology. If some people want to do one thing, other people want to do another thing. I mean, how are you broaching and preparing for that at VCCP?
As I think every other business in the world is wrestling with the same thing. We've got a steering group which is dedicated to working this out for our teams. We're a global agency. There's 1,000 of us around the world, and everyone has their own individual needs, right? And so I think, first off, it's important to have your finger on the pulse of how everyone is feeling, right? So it's about having surveys. It's about listening to what everyone is saying. But importantly, you can't please all the people all the time, right? I think there's a clear acknowledgement that the world has changed, right? And that this isn't just a flash in the pan change. This is a long-term change, and we need to figure out how to work differently. But everything that Pete and Polly have just said, it's there are different ways to approach it. Do you go 3 days in, 2 days off? Do you shorten the working day? Do you get prescriptive about when people need to be in? And for us, really, the more we debated it, the more we realized actually you can't please all the people all the time. So our approach, which is I think a typical VCCP approach, is just a rededication to our flexible working pledge that we already had in place, right? And basically what that says is we're going to treat everyone like grown-ups, right? We're going to trust that they will do the work that they need to do to not let each other down and not let our clients down. Because culturally, as an agency, we all get out of bed in the morning, and hopefully all agencies do. We get out of bed in the morning to make great work for our clients, right? And so what we're saying effectively is how you do that throughout the day is up to you. We are coming back. We're planning to come back at a reduced capacity. So we'll have 80% capacity because we are anticipating that probably 1 in 5 people at any given moment is going to be working from home, right? But that said, and I alluded to this earlier, we do want to remain a primarily office-based culture, right? So you can't, for instance, move to Cornwall. Because of that creative spark that I mentioned already, right? Or that chat over an Aqua Libra in the kitchen that leads to a Cannes award-winning idea somehow, right? So while we have done some great work remotely, and we take pride in that over the last 18 months, I think largely that is due to the fact that we had some really strong foundations, right? We had strong foundations, we had strong relationships, and a strong culture that allowed us to move quite quickly into creative mode that still worked, right? And as I think everyone has said, the interesting thing for us is going to be, what does hybrid mode look like, right? Because we were really good at working as an agency in an office. We had that down. We had to get really good really quickly at all working from home, which we did. The great unknown right now is what's the half and half, right? And to echo what I think Pete said, technology is going to play a really important role. It needs to feel, you want it to feel seamless, right? I want to walk into a room with 4 people and be able to call up 3 other people. And I want to be able to do that without wasting 10 minutes of my time trying to figure out the technology. And I want to do that in a way that everybody feels included, right? The other really important thing that I think Polly said, it's going to be about, there's an important cultural shift here where etiquette plays a role, right? In that you see it happening already. You've got 4 people in a room dialed on to 3 other people, and you'll have a good hour's meeting, and you'll come to a consensus and agree a way forward as a team. And then those 3 people dial off, and then just naturally, the people in the room will continue chatting, right? And in that conversation, they might get to a completely different conclusion or a completely different way forward. And without meaning to, just because they were there, they've already excluded the rest of the team, right? So it's it's going to be a challenge. Technology, etiquette, culture. I think there's definitely an opportunity with hybrid working, but there's there's going to be a period of time where we just don't get it right, or we need to work it through. And I think it's going to be certainly very interesting.
I mean, I suppose you've got the extra challenge of clients who maybe are doing things in different ways and have different expectations. Again, I suppose only adds to the jigsaw, to the challenge. I mean, if you're working in one way but your clients are working in another and expecting a different way, are you just going to flex to their requirements, or is that another frontier that you need to explore and experiment with over the next months?
No, it's a great question, right? It's about being flexible. We have our way. We know we have a way that we work, but it's also about listening to what a client needs and responding to that. I mean, we actually had a great year in 2020. I know that sounds cynical, but from an agency point of view, we had a good year. We were campaign integrated agency of the year. We got a 9 out of 9 on the campaign school report. We topped the new business leagues, but we had to deal with some pretty crazy situations, right? I mean, one of our clients to this day, the team haven't actually met in person, right? We won the Walker's account in the summer of last year after a very lengthy pitch. Every single thing we've delivered for them in the last 9 months has been delivered remotely, right? And it's incredible work. It's work that we're really proud of. That's completely repositioned them. Another great example is where we had to work differently and come up with a slightly different approach was something that one of my personal favorites. We pulled together a campaign that reunited Take That in a live stream, including Robbie Williams, by the way. Had it hosted by Alexander the Meerkat, and ran it for an hour, which just felt like a party, and it was seen by millions of people. And we did that all off the back of a proactive idea in 6 weeks, right? It was, I mean, it's a great example of how we surprised ourselves, right? We didn't think we could do this kind of thing. And so, as I said before, it pushes you out of your comfort zone, and makes you work in a certain way. And the other point here is it's brought us closer to our clients, right? It's humanized everyone. We've seen into their bedrooms. We've met their wives or husbands, their pandemic puppies, or in my case, kittens. And the reality at the end of the day is that people like working with people. So while it was completely strange initially, we took some good things out of it.
Pollock, if I can bring you back in on that last point that Dan made initially, it's obviously been a strain. It requires leaders and organizations to perhaps show levels of empathy and understanding that they might not have, or in different ways at least. I mean, is there any insight into how better leaders and organizations can manage stresses and strains that have become very apparent in the last year of their employees?
I think the first thing is acknowledging it. My daughter's 9. She always says everything's trash, which is quite a good word that's not too rude. But anyway, so this year has been trash. It's just been awful in so many countless ways. There's people who've had bereavements, people who have been, trapped at home shielding, people who have had enormous financial pressures, and I guess partly because it's been so split. We did this big piece of work through the pandemic called Renew Normal to try and identify what out of this trash can we rescue? Where are the good things so that we can find ways to hold on to them through this? And, so we surveyed probably 50,000 people in total. And every single thing, there were some people who thought it was better and some people who thought it was worse. Some people hate remote working. Some people have eaten much better because they're at home and they're cooking from scratch. And some people have pigged out on cake and ice cream and Deliveroo every day. So every single kind of metric you could think of, some people have gone in each direction. And that's quite hard then to manage if you're just thinking about your team, is because you do something which feels like it will be good for people, and there's going to be some people for whom it's horrible, whether it's being forced back to the commute or offering free tea and cake in the office, while some people who are struggling with their pandemic pounds are going to, it's so complicated. And the only way you can navigate that complexity as a business leader, I think, is just to really patiently engage with your team, with your people. And the country as a whole, I think, has to do a lot of that as well. It's been the most profound impact on our collective mental health. The Office of National Statistics collects every year well-being data. Basically, how happy are you feeling and how worthwhile do you feel your life is? And just boom, it just dropped catastrophically through this pandemic. And there are silver linings around community spirit, around the kind of stuff we've talked today about in terms of inspirational business achievements, inspirational community giving. The vaccines make me stop in awe every time I really think about it, but it's still been trash. And we have to accept that and then try and find a way to rebuild our mental health. And also something that I think is implicit in what Dan is saying, which is what I think a policy wonk like me would call social capital, our relationships between each other. And one of the reasons why we came together, so many teams came together so successfully early on, is because of strong social capital, because of feeling like a family, the phrase Dan used. And the problem is that over time, that can seep away. It seeps away with new starters. It seeps away with, I haven't made a cup of tea for any of my colleagues in about 15 months. And I used to do that a lot, It's a nice thing to do to somebody. It's those tiny gifts, the understanding, the collaboration, and all of that seeps away. So I think an opportunity there is for business leaders to think about, how do I build social capital within my team, within my organization, that feeling of being like a family. And, we can all laugh at sort of away days involving team building and doing assault courses. That's probably not quite the right thing. But actually, if we're going to go through the process of bringing people together, how do you maximize the social capital that you generate? Because I feel like what we've done over this last 18 months is actually burned through quite a lot of it. And so many of us are just kind of exhausted. And we need a bit of time and patience to make friends again.
Absolutely, a lovely way to put it. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I mean, the last certainly last year anyway, flexibility and agile just meant working really hard, really long, and running really fast. It needs to be a bit more methodical. It needs to be a bit more process driven. It needs to be more embedded. But there are and so there's no shortage of challenges. Pete, if I could bring you back in, obviously you're a leader in your organisation, and you have many people looking to you on the question of emotional support and motivation. If you could reflect on how that might have changed and how that might change moving forward if people are working in a different, more hybrid working way.
Yeah, I think it's been a key theme of the last year, isn't it? And I'm just picking up on something that Dan touched on around how I think the walls between aspects of our lives have come down. And I think in some ways that's been difficult because it's hard sometimes to see the line between work and home in terms of when you stop work and when sort of home life begins. But I think as a positive, I think I've loved seeing people's dogs, cats, their lives sort of appear on screen, and us to look at the broader landscape of the lives people are leading. And that's, I think, been a good thing. It's felt a lot, I guess, a lot less corporate, a lot more human. And I'd love that to continue. And I think that snapshot into real life for me, both with the team I'm running now and the team in the previous business I was in, TSB, before joining here, we really changed the focus of our one-to-ones. I think when we first went into the pandemic, thinking about TSB, it was quite functional. So what Dan was saying was, we've got to keep, keep branches open. We've got this stuff to go on, boom, boom, boom. We had to get a campaign out within a matter of weeks. So it was quite a sort of rhythm of activity. That shifted over time, and certainly I've carried that into Boots now, that the one-to-ones are far more about how are you doing? How are people feeling? What's going on in people's lives? And yes, we absolutely need to cover, projects and how things are going, but more important to sort of just check in with people, because, Polly touched on this a little bit as well. I think everyone's pandemic experience has been different. So, I feel lucky that I've had family around me and I've got a garden, but I've had people in teams who are in a flat on their own. It's been a really different experience if you feel that way and you have got less people around you. So the need to walk in someone else's shoes, to listen as a leader, and to appreciate and offer the help people need has been really important. One of the things we've done in a marketing team at Boots is carve out a lunch hour. So we've carved out clear time where we say, we won't put time in your diary for calls at these times a day, because you want to respect the time that people have got. We've also deliberately shortened some calls so they're 25 minutes, not half an hour, to allow people time for that cup of tea in the kitchen that was referred to earlier on, just to have a comfort break, just to step up from the desk and not be sort of on a screen all the time. So we've tried to flex how we work to give people space and room to breathe, but also just a chance to live life in its fullest way. We've all tried to through the pandemic as well. So it's far more, it's a bit, Russell, I'd love as the human side of leadership to be far more visible as we come out of this. And yes, look, we've all got jobs to do. They are important, but the reality that our lives are 360 degrees, aren't they? And every aspect of it matters into how we show up at work and who we are and how we show up. I think the pandemic has revealed that more and more, and I'd love to see that continue. So it really has shifted a dynamic, I think, of the conversations between leaders and members of their team that I'd like to see continue.
Well, there was that, it was almost a buzz phrase for a little while, that bringing your whole self to work. And I think we definitely have, not always by design, sometimes often by accident. My daughter has turned up on many a meeting call, many a presentation over the last year or so. Or there are definitely aspects of my life that I don't want to bring to work, but that's another story for another time. I mean, Polly, if I can come back to you, I mean, it's rightfully, as we've just discussed, the emphasis has generally been on employee experience, what are the employees going through, but there has to be a balance, doesn't there? There has to be a balance where organizations set the parameters. Not everybody can be flexible and free to do what they want and work how they want. I mean, so how does an organization sort of get that balance right, and what advice would you offer?
You're absolutely right. I mean, an employment relationship is where you hire somebody to do a task to help meet the needs of the business, and you pay them for it. So you have to be really clear about the parameters of what the business needs. I mean, it was already there in flexible working regulations before, that people had the right to request flexible working, and you as a manager had to then evaluate, will this cause harm to the business? Is it still possible for us to carry on and achieve the goals that we need for your post if you aren't here, or if you're working different hours or a compressed week, whatever it might be? And I guess what this experience has shown is that probably lots of those business need assessments are kind of wrong. We were always very cautious about them, about what the business needs. And I think what people need to go into this new phase with is all of the insight and learning and adaptability and creativity around evaluating what is it that the business needs, and what are creative solutions that help people to be their best self at work. Because often, if people are incredibly stressed about, leaving at one particular minute so that they can get the particular train to get the particular child from nursery because they're going to be fined if they're 5 minutes late, or if somebody's under financial pressure, which is preventing them from sleeping because they need to be able to take on more shifts or take on more hours, or whatever it might be, that prevents them from being their best self at work. So I think we have to consider, I guess, the enlightened interest of the business, not just, actually, I just need you to be here at 5 p.m, but how can I make sure that my employee is bringing all of their ideas and creativity to the job? And the more creative industries that we're talking about here in the marketing sector, absolutely. If somebody's in a bad mood or grumpy or stressed or hasn't been sleeping, or they're worried about their family or the child pickup, they're not going to be the one that has that award-winning idea over a cup of tea in the kitchen. There are different kinds of jobs across the whole industry. You can't really be an intensive care nurse anywhere other than an intensive care ward. So every single business leader, every manager needs to think about that. And it's often cited in productivity research that one of Britain's kind of outlying problems is that first and second tier of management, we're not as good as other countries are. The government's done some good things. They've started to subsidize more management training. I think they could do more of that. It's also a job for more senior leaders to think about how are you developing your frontline managers to be able to have those difficult, complex, and actually quite creative conversations.
Further illustration of how much more needs to be discussed, how much more needs to be developed, how much more needs to be achieved. But at least we're having those conversations. Now, I'm going to ask you all one final question. If I could ask you to be as cogent and as concise in your answer as possible. Dan, I'm going to come to you for that final question first. If there's one thing you think will help your team or the workforce more generally to be more effective in the future of work, what would that be?
I think I'm going to cheat and I'll give you two things, but I think I might give them to you as a combination, which is for me, and we've all touched on it. I think it's a combination of flexibility and empathy, right? So we can see from the announcement we've just had that we're still in a state of huge uncertainty. So we're a long way off from having all the answers to the situation, and we need to stay agile as we figure out what hybrid mode looks like. We need to be empathic to the needs of our staff who are still going through challenging times, to parents, to people living alone, as you've mentioned, and to people with family who they haven't seen because they live abroad, for new starters. The list goes on, right? Because at the end of the day, what makes an agency great, or what makes any business great, are the people and the collective culture and output of those people. And given we just don't know what's going to happen, it's about being able to roll with it quickly, and it's about being able to empower your people to work in the best way that works for them.
Here. Thank you. Dan, Pete, same question for you.
Familiar themes, just two words, Russell: technology and humanity. And I think we still need, for me, technology to really be our friend and help us, but technology in a way that regardless of where you work, everyone feels equal and in the room. And humanity, that I want to keep this sense of, you described it as bringing your full self to work, with this sense of we are listening, employees and also to customers. There's this sort of 360 thing here of being really aware of what's going on in people's lives, because it is still this really uncertain phase. We Boots is everywhere on the high street. People are within 10 minutes of a Boots store. So the importance of listening right now to the role we play in people's lives and the support we give to our colleagues and to how they turn up and help our customers is more important than ever. So that listening, that humanity fused with brilliant technology, I think is a vital ingredient for the future.
Humanity married with technology. Thank you, Pete. Polly, the final word to you.
All of that's really great advice. And actually, I'm really confident in most businesses will experiment and try things out and find really good ways through. What I'm worried about are the more complicated sort of social consequences around power and around money. The poorer you are, the less likely you are to have the power to argue your case for the flexible working that works for you, or to be in a job that can be done remotely or flexibly at all. And that doesn't just create kind of dynamics between between the population, it also creates different dynamics between places. So we are seeing kind of wealthy suburban high streets grow and thrive, and artisanal bakeries just making more money hand over fist than they know what to do with, whilst more challenging areas are sucked into really kind of deep deprivation and business closures. So I think at the macro level, we need to think about, this is quite a big shift that we're going to go through. And how do we make sure that all that learning about the fragility that comes from inequality and injustice that we got through the pandemic, how do we create solutions to help bring remote working opportunities to people in more deprived areas, create thriving high streets, allow us to adapt and build a society that's not as fragile as the one that went into this pandemic?
Thank you. I mean, a sober but really important point to think about. There's a bigger macro picture here, and obviously we're discussing with our relative privilege how we approach it from an office point of view. There are so many more considerations to this from a macro and an economic point of view. So thank you for making that point, Polly. I mean, one thing that I take away from this entire conversation is, as I mentioned earlier, we've swung so far in such a short space of time that we're now asking questions we wouldn't have dreamt of asking ourselves just 18 months ago. I think in many ways those questions are absolutely right and proper to be asking, but there are many considerations, there are many implications, as you've quite rightly pointed out, Polly. So thank you to you, thank you to Pete, thank you to Dan for your fantastic insights. It's an incredibly relevant, pertinent and interesting area. So thank you very much for your time and your answers and illustration of your journeys. So thank you very much, and until next time, goodbye.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. You've been working, but you're flirting.